Welcome, everyone. Bon après-midi à tous. My name is Justin Pressot, and I'm joined by my co-chair, Dr. Dave Campbell, and together, along with the Knowledge Mobilization Committee, are absolutely delighted to welcome you to the next in our series of webinars for ACT. This one in particular came about in conversation between our committee, the Knowledge Mobilization Committee, and the Patient Engagement Committee, recognizing the overlap and opportunities between the activities that both of our committees focus on, and so saw this opportunity to really showcase patient engagement activities specifically as it relates to knowledge mobilization in this webinar. So just delighted to hand it over to the Patient Engagement Committee, who are going to take the lead on the next step of this webinar. And please feel free to add your questions in the chat and throughout, and there'll be a Q&A at the end. But that's it for me, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Nicholson.
Great. Thank you, Sierra, for the slides. I'm only going to say a few words, and I'll hand it over to our speakers, and I'll introduce them in a moment. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I'm based in Ottawa, and so we wanted to do a land acknowledgement, and we wanted to recognise that the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute and the hospital are located on traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people. We have the privilege and responsibility to represent and include in our research First Nations, Métis, and Inuit of many backgrounds and from many treaty and non-treaty lands and territories, and to demonstrate respect for Indigenous peoples' contributions and cultures. We also acknowledge traditional knowledge and healing developed over countless generations. The research experiments that were done to Indigenous people in our history will not be repeated. And just to sort of reflect briefly on this, the images you'll see across the top of the slide here are from an art series, Algonquin Ancestral Medicinal Knowledge, which showcases Algonquin knowledge of medicinal plants and the practice of passing that down through the generations. So I wanted to sort of use this as a way to reflect and invite you to reflect on this land acknowledgement, but also the importance of relationships which take time and develop over time, and how we share knowledge in a way that's not exploitative of individuals or groups, but which is authentic and recognizes the contributions that those individuals and groups make to research and who have been responsible for developing knowledge that we hope to share and use to improve health and healthcare. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this may be familiar to some people, but I just wanted to reflect, when we talk about patient engagement, what are we actually talking about? And for us, this is the idea that patients, researchers, healthcare providers, and we have a very broad definition of patients in terms of individuals with a health condition, family members, caregivers, friends, etc. But it's about that active collaboration. That's the key point here, to build research programs, sustainable health systems, and so forth. So engaging patients is an integral component in the development and implementation of all elements of the strategy for patient-oriented research and patient-oriented research more generally. So we're talking about partners, not participants here. Next slide, please. And really, to drill home the point, I wanted to sort of emphasize two recent documents that came out in the last year or so. The first is the updated Declaration of Helsinki, which talks and emphasizes and embeds and makes explicit now that meaningful engagement is key to ethical research. And you'll see at the bottom, this is in every stage, but also includes explicit consideration of engagement in understanding and disseminating results. And then the second document is the WHO Guidance for Best Practices in Clinical Trials. And if you look at the calls to action on the ACT website, there's explicit call to support the implementation of this document. So again, just emphasizing that patient engagement should be a norm and embedded in an appropriate manner in all trials, not an optional extra. And again, this is throughout the continuous cycle of knowledge sharing and dissemination. So really, we wanted to emphasize this as a sort of key driver behind some of the things we're going to talk about today. Next slide, please. And I'll hand over to Maureen to go through that.
So hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Smith. I'm calling from Ottawa, and I have the pleasure of co-chairing the Patient Engagement Committee with Stuart Nichols. And we're a committee comprised of 12 to 15 members and representing 3 interest holder groups, an amazing group of experienced patient partners completely committed to patient partnership in clinical trials, a community partner, and researchers, clinicians, just like absolute, just people who just really want to advance this area and work really hard. And we're really there to provide insight, leadership, and support within the ACT consortium regarding patient engagement in clinical trials. That's our mandate. I put our 4 objectives there for you to take a look at. I'm not going to read them out, but we're pretty proud that we've been able to do quite a bit already and contribute to ACT's work, and especially in identifying barriers and gaps in patient engagement in clinical trials. We've got a great team of people working on all that. I put the website at the bottom if you want to go and read a little bit more about us. But you'll meet some of those people today who are on the patient engagement committee. They're here as presenters, and we're always happy to talk to anyone who has a special interest in patient engagement in clinical trials. Back to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Maureen. If you go to the next slide, please. So Maureen and I are here just to moderate and facilitate today. But I just want to share that we're coming from across the country, all the way from Alberta to PEI. And if we go to the next slide, please. These are going to be your speakers for the day. Manuel Escoto is going to kick us off in just a moment. And then we'll have a presentation from Ada Tang, Amanda Doherty-Kirby, and then Jan de Fosse, who will finish off before the Q&A, where we'll go through the questions in the chat or any questions that are on the mic. So I'll hand over to you, Manuel. Next slide, please.
Perfect. Thanks so much for the introduction. Building on what's been said, really want to emphasize that when we talk about meaningful patient engagement, it's not really about just an add-on to your research. It's about doing research differently. It means partnering with patient partners as experts in lived experience and recognize that expertise that patient partners bring to ensure that research is relevant, respectful, and actionable. Patient partners can help shape research questions, outcomes, and interventions, and really ground the work of all you brilliant researchers into real-world needs, ultimately leading to stronger uptake policy and practice. With that very quick preamble, I'll ask to go to the next slide, please. So today I really want to talk about integrated knowledge translation, or IKT. And the reason we wanted to focus on this is because it takes this step further, it takes this experience of patient engagement a step further by embedding, so IKT focuses on knowledge users, but by embedding knowledge users, including patient partners throughout the entire research process. And not just at the end when information is ready to be shared or disseminated. So instead of researchers working in isolation throughout the research cycle, IKT positions patient partners as co-creators of knowledge from the very beginning, which is a very key aspect in our traditional knowledge mobilization efforts. So they help shape priorities, shape methods, interpret findings through different lenses that they bring. And again, you'll hear me emphasize this a lot over the next few minutes, but it's really to ensure that results are applied to improve care, policy, and outcomes. It's a different model of thinking. It really shifts research from more of a linear process to a more continuous cycle of where we're learning, where we're implementing new actions and improvements. So you'll see here on the left hand or on the right hand side, I have the research cycle. I'll try to go through this quickly, but really to emphasize the role that patient partners can bring. So when we speak about priority setting and planning, this is where we're defining the question that needs to be asked. And patient partners need to have a voice here. Research, as we've seen, sometimes might not reflect real world needs, but by integrating patient partners at this step, their needs, their priorities are being reflected in the work. And I especially want to highlight this with respect to communities that may be facing inequities. They also have to be included in this conversation, or else they'll continue to be left out of the conversation. When we talk about development of research proposals, so once the priorities are set, the team develops a proposal for a study. And here, patient partners can help design this research study. They can ensure that methods are feasible, culturally appropriate, relevant, and again, emphasizing that the outcomes will matter to the people to the subjects of your study. As we move into the scientific review, again, research has to go through that scientific, rigorous, and quality review. And here, knowledge mobilization and patient partners play a role by, again, highlighting where the gaps are, where the barriers exist, emphasizing community priorities. As you move into the ethics review, patient partners play a role I've seen this firsthand, identifying different different barriers that might be that researchers might overlook when it comes to recruitment, for example, when working with equity denied groups, for example, and ultimately by including patient partners at this stage, you're building trust and accountability. I like this piece of oversight and communication, and here what I really want to emphasize is that knowledge mobilization means with patient partners really means is ongoing communications with your partner. It's about transparency, sharing progress, sharing challenges, where adaptations are required, and keeping your patient partners in the loop throughout the work. With recruitment, patient partners help build trust again with participants. They can help co-create recruitment materials, strategies, utilize their networks to ensure that the study and recruitment opportunities are being shared in the appropriate venues. When we go to data analysis, again, it's about making sense of those findings. By involving patient partners, results are now be able to be interpreted by multiple lenses. We all bring multiple lenses, including patient partners who, as I mentioned earlier, bring that lived experience. So communities and patient partners really help shape how that data is being shared, the story is being told. And of course, throughout this process, we have to evaluate and reflect on our ongoing needs. So all to say that when patient partners are involved, we generate knowledge that is relevant, trustworthy, and ready to be used. I'll quickly ask to go to the next slide. So the image here represents the knowledge mobilization cycle. I really love this image, and it shows how interconnected each stage is. Each stage relies on collaboration between the research team and patient partners. So I mentioned IKT really focuses on how we create research, making sure that the questions we ask, the way we study, we design studies are relevant. So it's really about ensuring research is relevant again from the very beginning. So while IKT is about how research is done, I like to make the distinction that IKT is about what happens next. So IKT is about co-creating throughout that research process to make sure evidence is meaningful and relevant, whereas knowledge mobilization are the strategies and pathways to disseminate and implement evidence into real-world settings. So here, that's the quick point I wanted to emphasize. They're very interconnected pieces, but they have a little bit of a different framing. Next slide, please. So both IKT and knowledge mobilization represent different models of co-creating and disseminating learnings that are different than the usual end-of-grant knowledge translation, as I've listed there, which really focuses on sharing results after research is completed. So end-of-grant usually looks like publishing a paper, presenting findings at a conference, sending out a final report or summary. And while these are very valuable steps and recognize the role that they bring to the research process, when we're talking about creating change, when we're talking about using the lived experiences, leveraging the lived experience of patient partners to create change, to better policy, to better improve outcomes, sometimes they might not be enough. So that's why on the right-hand side here, you'll see an image that highlights the differences between the integrated knowledge translation strategy and then end of grant. And as you can see through the gray shaded area there, IKT involves patient partners throughout each step of the way. So understanding who's leading the research, what the problem is, coming up with the research and design, collecting data. And really my main message here is that an IKT approach, integrating patient partners through each step of the research cycle, is more strategic, is more impactful, and will lead to better outcomes. So with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Thank you. My name is Ada Tang. I'm from McMaster University, and I bring the researcher voice to this presentation. In speaking and thinking about patient engagement and knowledge translation, what do researchers need to think about early, and why is it important for us to think about it early? There are challenges, and it stems from conceptualizing the project itself and grant writing and even before. So what I'll share with you today is kind of from a researcher perspective, and hopefully that continues to set the stage for the presenters that follow me. Next slide, please. We know that funding bodies expect to see integrated knowledge translation or co-created knowledge mobilization, not just for translating knowledge at the end of the project, as Manuel had just shared, but woven throughout the whole process. And we know that successful knowledge mobilization doesn't happen by accident, so neither should meaningful engagement of our patient partners to enhance KT. And this takes intentional planning and relationship building. We know we can't write a grant overnight, or one that at least will have a chance at being successful. And similarly, we can't expect integrated knowledge translation to happen overnight. It takes time to build and to find partners and have conversations about goals and build trust. And so that takes resources, and engagement requires budgeting and planning for accessibility and things like that. So I like to think of planning like growing a plant from the ground up, and we are planting the seeds of a grant. And so ideally, we're thinking of ways of engaging patient engagement in a genuine way and for effective mobilization throughout the whole process. So we've sown the seeds, and here we are kind of growing the roots. It takes time to establish these roots, and we want to be really clear, first of all, about what the roles and expectations are. We want to be careful and clearly convey to reviewers who are reviewing our grants that our patient engagement is not symbolic or tokenistic, but instead that we are very clear on how we're going to do that, and that should come across in the grant that we submit. Saying that we'll consult with our patients is probably not going to be enough. It will come off as being tokenistic, but actually describing what that looks like, who we're going to be meeting with, what we're going to be seeking feedback on, how we're going to be doing that, at what stages of the research process, whether it's reviewing consent forms or recruitment materials or co-presenting results. And we recognize and value that the lived experience is a form of expertise, as Manuel had just shared. Our patient partners bring insights to the research process that researchers simply can't provide, and they can help us identify the outcomes and the ways to mobilize knowledge in ways that matter most to them. And then if next click, we know that it also shouldn't be just a one-time consultation, just like any other engagement of knowledge users, whether it's clinicians or community partners or health service organizations, that these aren't just one and dones, that it really has to be an ongoing conversation and something that evolves as the project grows, so that it is a shared ownership between the researchers and all of the knowledge users, not just a single check box that's checked off. So as we continue to grow our plant, if we go to the next slide, all of this takes time. And it takes time for researchers to learn how to communicate in plain language and facilitate inclusive discussions, to facilitate knowledge mobilization. And it takes time for patient partners to understand the research process and feel comfortable contributing and feel like they understand enough about the research process to be able to also comment on knowledge mobilization. And ideally, the learning goes both ways. So the learning that has to happen and mutual capacity building happens for both the researchers as well as the patient partners. We're learning from patients with lived experience, and similarly, patients are learning about research so that we can both be active contributors to the process. So this reciprocity strengthens the science and the translation that follows, and it is mutual. In terms of building capacity. In the next slide, all of this will need to be resourced properly, and that means budgeting. And so at the grant phase, we need to budget for all of the things that knowledge translation costs. And very typically we'll write, so much funds allocated to peer review publications, for travel to conferences, but there's also other budget for effective patient-engaged knowledge mobilization that should be considerations in the grant itself. So budgeting for honoraria to your patient partners, any funds needed to make sure that meetings and materials are accessible, any funds needed for travel, for plain language editing, for capacity building, any workshops and training that might need to happen, build that into the budget so that you are resourced well to do this knowledge mobilization from the beginning. As we continue to build the plant, and on the next slide, we're thinking then about beyond academia and different ways that we can mobilize knowledge and disseminate knowledge. And Amanda's going to speak to this more about how beyond the traditional academic route of disseminating knowledge, using and leveraging the expertise of our patient partners to try to get that knowledge to where the information is needed most and best used, who the real audiences are, how to access spaces where patients and families and caregivers and partners aren't. They don't read peer review journals and they don't go to scientific conferences, but building in ways to mobilize knowledge that will be getting that information to the people who will use it. And our patient partners will know and will be able to advise us on, where their community goes for trusted information and how they prefer to receive it. So again, building into budget and building into study timelines, time and budget needed to maybe think about knowledge mobilization that is in quote unquote less traditional forms, but in ways that are more accessible to the patients and communities. And our patient partners will share ways in which they want to engage in knowledge mobilization, and Jan will speak about this some more. On the next slide is also thinking about how to evaluate engagement. It's something that's often overlooked in patient engagement. So it's not just about the research outcomes, but how do we evaluate our engagement with our patient partners? What worked well and what could we do differently in the future? And hopefully keep building this plant and sustaining it over time. The relationship that you've built in preparing for the grant and conducting the project has taken a lot of investment and time and care to grow this plant, and you want it to continue. The roots that you've grown here are strong and deep and will keep growing the plant. But if it is tokenistic, if it is just on the surface level, then the plant is not going to have a chance to survive and continue to thrive. So in my last slide, it's really just a summary of everything that I've shared here today, that it's hopefully has laid the groundwork for how patient partnership is important for knowledge mobilization and how we're growing strong roots by taking time to build that relationship in the research process all the way and including grant writing, and hopefully you're successful in the grant so that you can be resourced well to do this well, because we know that meaningful patient engagement isn't easy and there are barriers, but if we can remove some of the barriers like time and budget and resources because we built it into the grant process, then hopefully that this process is much stronger. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda.
So I love that Ada talked about reducing those barriers, because I'm going to give you some practical examples as I speak. But you would notice maybe that there was no affiliation other than the ACT Patient Engagement Committee on our title slide. I am a very active patient partner, and I love sharing knowledge and in my networks and everything. I'm very, very passionate about this topic. And before I kind of venture into some more traditional ways of sharing knowledge, I want to talk about the next slide, which encourages you to think about your why. Why are you wanting to get the knowledge out there? You know, are you trying to change attitudes? Are you just sharing your research as a whole? Are you informing? And who are you trying to reach too? Are you trying to reach attendees at conferences? Are you trying to reach the general public? Are you trying to reach everybody? And I hope you would be. In this particular slide talks about some alternative ways that you can share knowledge with an audience. For example, the As Per Usual podcast by Anna Hudick is a wonderful podcast now in its 3rd season that talks about engagement and research. And she has gone through all of the different strategy for patient-oriented research entities and looked at their engagement practices and asked questions, brought guests on. If you want to learn more about patient engagement, I strongly recommend that you read this or you listen to this podcast. You can have visual ways. And this comic strip here, I'm proud to say I was actually part of creation of this comic strip, as was Maureen. And it actually shares a little bit about what a learning health system is in a way that is understandable to the public and to others. And you can have many, many other visual ways of sharing as well. I run an Instagram account, and I'm also admin a Facebook account for the type of diabetes that my kids, genetic diabetes that my kids have. And I often will share I'll share things there, infographics about papers or also other papers that come out that may be relevant to the people in the group. You can have a plain language summary, magazine or social media. And while you're thinking about those alternative ways, don't forget that patient partners also have additional skills. You may say, I have no idea how to do X, Y, Z to share the knowledge, but you're going to have patient partners that maybe have those skills, or maybe think about things in a different way. Recently, I had the opportunity, I live in PEI, and we were doing a workshop, and I was able to contact the local news anchor and say, can I come on and talk about this? So also think about the context. So I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide. And even though we said this is beyond the journal, I really did want to say, yes, patient partners can be authors. And I'm sharing some resources here. For example, there's a very short video on how do I publish a paper that's for teams with patient partners as team members. So it is indeed possible. Patient partners should fulfill the 4 ICMJE criteria, which is substantial contributions to the conception or design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work, and drafting the work or revising it critically for important content, and approval of the version to be published, and agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work, and ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. And patient partners can indeed do this, meet this criteria, even though there is some thought that they may not be able to. And what I also like about this publication that I don't show here is that it also provides a step-by-step overview of the publication process, which is helpful to anyone new, patient partner, new student, anyone new to the publication process. So next slide, please. And so there are lots of considerations. As I said, not all journals support patient partners as authors, and this could be an attitude or policies. Actually, there was a survey done in 2021, and 69% of editors thought that patient partners could be authors, but that means there was 31% that did not. But only 3% of journals had policies in place in order for patient partners to be authors. And we need to think about, you know, does a patient partner want to be an author? This has to be a choice. Some people may not want to be recognized as authors. That might be a very, it might be mental health research. It might be rare disease. Like there may be different reasons why a patient partner doesn't want to be an author. It's an offer to them or an ask them if they want to be. They may participate in the whole process of creating a paper, but they may just want to be acknowledged, or they want to be placed in a group and they don't want their name on a paper. They may want, as I said, they may want to be anonymous. Support may be needed. So you might share, what does a paper look like? And I mean, I'm talking, you may be new to patient engagement. You may have very experienced patient partners. You may have some that are new, but you may want to walk them through the process or provide the first iteration of the paper so that they can critically edit it. So we have some training. Ada talked about that training, like how to write a plain language summary. Maureen has provided training like that in the past in another capacity. And there is possibility, Ada has said budget for it. Budget for patient engagement. That includes budgeting for the time that for knowledge translation. And we want to also consider, you know, who's responsible in this co-writing process. As I said, the feedback and the plain language summary. And what do these criteria mean anyway? People may have questions, be prepared to answer them. There may be other paperwork. So again, the support may be training, but it also might be just, what do these agreements mean that you have to sign? How do you set up an ORCID ID? What types of conflict of interest do I have to, you know, share? Because to be honest, I get confused about conflict of interest all the time, and I'd rather overshare than not share. And we need to keep the communication lines open, so that we need to talk about the process. What's it mean when an article gets rejected? What are our next steps? And when published, even the permission to tag on social media so when work is published. And so what I also need you to recognize that even with papers, we have the opportunity to disseminate in other spaces. So recently, we have had, I was on a paper about engagement, and the young person, the student that was facilitating the engagement and leading the process, specifically asked us if we could be tagged. And then once we're tagged, we share more widely within our networks. And so that amplifies the reach. And also make sure they have a copy, because sometimes things are published in closed, not open access. So you can be an author and not actually have access to the papers that you've authored. And so these are little tips and tricks just to provide support. And I will say I had a wonderful experience with this last paper that got published on patient barriers and facilitators to patient engagement, because everything that we gave back as edits into the paper, we got a response to. I incorporated it. I couldn't incorporate it because of this. I did, this is how it was done, and this is how the paper was updated. And so that communication was very clear about our writing process. You know, any edits that we were made were addressed. It had to be submitted several times to different journals because we weren't quite the right fit, but always that communication was in between. And so more recently, even recently, maybe about the same time, I was co-presenting in Charlottetown, which is very close to me in PEI. And I had a very, I think it's my best experience co-presenting at a conference. And could you go to the next slide, please, Sarah? And so as Ada has said, there's lots to think about. And I've broken this down to before, during, and after. And so it looks like a lot, but when you think about it, it's being supportive so that people can actually do the job that they want to do in communicating the research. And so if you go to the next slide, like think about the abstract. I get to provide feedback on any abstract as a patient partner of anything that's co-presented with my name at any conference. And so if I can say, well, why are we talking about that? Or why not this? This is a resource if you have patient partners already. And also if you have other people, again, new to this process, that was co-developed through crowdsourcing on Twitter a few years ago, just as I was becoming a patient partner. And it talks about all the different pieces of an abstract and how to write an abstract. So it's a really good resource to have on hand. So at minimum, your patient partner should review an abstract. Thinking about registration, it can be daunting if you've never gone to a conference before. I have to say, I have a research background from way back when, but I've been a stay-at-home mom since 2006, and registering for my first travel conference, like conference away, I was like, okay, what do I do? What do I need? What do I need to know? Who pays? Sometimes in terms of equity, sometimes patient partners may not have that cash or capacity on a credit card to actually pay for that conference. Like, and sometimes they can be pretty pricey, or there might not be a patient partner, you know, category. In this recent conference, I was the first patient partner to ever co-present. And so now there wasn't a place for patient partners to register. The PI and the project had to go and advocate for it. And now they have an affiliate membership there. So it's a really, consider that. Like, is there a way to get a reduced rate for patient partners? Who's going to pay? And in this case, the PI actually, we sat on a call together and she paid for my registration. So I didn't have to recoup it after. And that was really lovely too, because I'm a really busy person. I deal with lots of medical issues in my house, plus lots of other patient partnership opportunities. And it just really helped to reduce stress on me. So co-creating, planning, who makes the slides, reviewing and practice, travel, again, think about cost, accommodation, who organizes, who pays. Some patient partners will want to organize this themselves. Some people will want you to organize it for them. You're going to have that discussion. Is there a contingency plan? I can tell you last year at the ACT, I got to the ACT conference this year, but last year my kid got COVID just as I was getting ready to leave, and I was like, I can't come. So do you have a contingency plan? Is there a video that can be shown as part of the presentation, or is it a hybrid? And co-creating the talk, that story, that flow. With this recent one, we met beforehand twice. We also practiced beforehand, and we practiced there. And so co-creating a poster is similar, like what's the story, providing the feedback, and sharing, there's other examples of not having, as I said, there was the policy that didn't have a patient partner. And there might be other things that the patient partner has to think about, like childcare. Is it on site? Or somebody else can come? Does your patient partner need a companion for whatever reason? So, but during the event, I'm a fan of WhatsApp, thanks to Maureen here. And so making sure you can connect with your patient partner during the event, so you can meet up, support, you can orient them to the conference. There may be patient partners like me who want to go and see absolutely everything they can. And there may be patient partners that will want to pick and choose and may not have capacity to do all that. And all of that is fine. But there may be some, ways to orient to conferences, how it works, the agenda, like this multi-sessions can get confusing as to where they are. Think about accessibility. If you have a patient partner who's in a wheelchair, is there a ramp to get on that stage? And if, is there, or others, there might be other accessibility needs. We practiced in the room that we were presenting in at this recent conference, and support can be like a glass of water and a box of tissues. We share our hearts. When we share the why, a lot of that can be bringing back memories and things like that. If we share the why, and I apologize, I talked too long. And then also think about fun. Maybe figure out a fun event you can do together to build relationships.
Amanda,
and so,
I can do this. I can do this because I consider you a friend. I'm going to nudge you to wrap up because we're going to run out of time. We've got Yan and we've got a question period, and I want to hear from Justin and Dave. So, but I know I can do this, and you're going to take it all in stride. So your passion is coming through very clearly. Can you wrap it up in the next 30 seconds?
I can. And actually, we're missing the next slide. That should have been during the event.
All right.
So this is me co-presenting. And can you go, and this is another way of my son and a patient partner on a project answering questions. So there's different ways to do this. And could you go to the next slide, please? I'm going to do 1 minute. check in with your patient partner, make sure they get reimbursed, reflect on your process, what went well, what could improve, and the impact. Your patient partner could impact other people at the conference, and they could take your results and share more widely. And also make sure you report it. And this applies to any other type of dissemination as well. And so now that you've heard about that, we're going to hear from Jan about some really innovation knowledge translation.
Hi, thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your participation and your listening. I'm Jan, based in Quebec, hence my accent. I've been a caregiver for over 10 years. My youngest son, now 13, lives with a condition called spinal muscular atrophy. At 4 months, genetic result predicted the life expectancy of less of 2 years. But he's currently in school and taking each challenge one step at a time. So over the past decade, our community has gone from no treatment to 3, and the systemic newborn screening for infants allow for treatment before symptoms appear. At that time, if our family hadn't had access to the literature and knowledge, we wouldn't have had access to the appropriate treatment or care, because even if the best practice that had been standardized elsewhere for years had still not been implemented where we are following. So thanks to the access of knowledge, we were able to adhere to the best practice by ourselves and, limit the damage on our own. So today, more than ever, I think we have to do the thing outside the box and often on our own with technology now. If, the evidence show that smoking is harmful for your health, do you have to wait a lot to quit? So I want to share with you my non-academic vision of knowledge mobilization, a vision where you don't impose the knowledge, but make it desirable, useful, and convincing so that people adopt it out of conviction. Since English is not my first language, and I like to lead by example, we're going to play a video, not a slide. The video was produced for $1.50 of electricity thanks to the AI. Maybe I could share the link. If you're not familiar with Notebook LM, this platform accepts all file types, photo, video, PDF, etc. Analyze, create link between the files, provide you a mind map, a summary, create white paper, podcast, or video in the language of your choice, and all this in few minutes. This tool allows you to transform a multi-page clinical report into a simple and effective video. And they have several of tools like this for free, I want to share in the chat an example of, last year at the Quebec, at the ACT Congress, they have a team who show information around AE utility to improve patient extubation outcomes in intensive care. So a few weeks ago, I saw the algorithm bring me the article, and I just pass it into the notebook application. And now even the French community could access to the resume. So again, really a great tool. I also, on YouTube, I create a channel, and I also share summaries of legal articles to help improve community advocacy. So many knowledge already exists. We now have the power and perhaps the individual duty to make it really accessible and make it out from the myth bins. Last thing, another link in the video you will see we refer to immersive platforms. So I would like to share you a link to a really great platform, and if even you're interested, me and other friends are open to make a workshop for introduce you to this kind of technology. So I'm ready to let you start the videos.
You ever wonder why these brilliant discoveries made in labs seem to take forever to actually show up in our daily lives? Well, it turns out there's this huge gap between what we know and what we do. So, let's get into it, because a massive change is happening right now. Okay, look at this number. Just let it sit there for a second. 30 to 45%. I mean, what on earth could that possibly represent? Yeah, that's it. It's the shocking percentage of patients who aren't getting care based on the very latest science. It's crazy, right? You've got labs overflowing with solutions on one side, and on the other, communities that are desperately looking for those answers. So the real question becomes, how do we finally fix this? And that is the question, isn't it? For decades, we've been relying on a model that, let's be honest, just isn't cutting it anymore. But what if? What if there's a fundamentally better way to do this? Think about the old way. It was this classic pyramid. You had researchers way up at the top, and we all just kind of hoped their findings would eventually trickle down. Yeah, trickle is the right word. But this new approach, it flips the whole thing on its head. It's not a pyramid anymore. It's a network. And it puts power, tools, and information directly into the hands of communities. And listen, this is way more than just a small tweak. We're talking about a completely new philosophy, a new recipe for change. We stop waiting for solutions to come from on high, and instead, we empower everyone to take action for themselves. This quote just nails the shift in thinking. The goal isn't to spend a decade trying to get a law passed. Nope. The goal is to inspire millions of people to change something, even a small thing in their own lives, tomorrow. It's about starting a dialogue, not just delivering a monologue. Now, for any of this to work, knowledge has to become translational. So what does that mean? It basically means a discovery can't stay locked in its own little box. It has to be able to travel. A breakthrough in neuroscience, for example, could suddenly spark an idea for a teacher, a video game developer, or even a manager. Knowledge becomes a living thing. I absolutely love this metaphor. The old model was like being shown a perfectly finished pie. Someone puts it in front of you and says, "This is what's good for you." Kind of intimidating. But the new model? It just gives you the recipe. Here are the ingredients. Here are the instructions. Now you can make it, you can adapt it, you can share your own version. You get to be the chef. So you see, knowledge is no longer a finished product that we just consume. Instead, it becomes a living tool, a collaborative project. It's a solution you can customize, and ultimately, it becomes an engine for real autonomy. Of course, a revolution like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's being made possible by an incredible new set of technologies. It's like we've all been given access to this amazing digital kitchen to start cooking in. And there's a real strategy here. You can think of it like an engagement funnel. First, you attract attention with short viral content. Then, you educate with deeper formats. And that last step, engage, is the most important one. You build communities where people can connect, act, and realize that they're not alone in facing whatever challenge they have. Because, let's be real, we've all been on those video calls staring at a grid of faces, feeling totally disconnected. The real challenge is recreating that feeling of being together. Immersive spaces let us do that. We can move around, form small groups, and have those spontaneous water cooler chats that build real connections. And then you add AI into the mix, which is basically a superpower for collaboration. Real-time translation boosts inclusion. Automated summaries drive efficiency. And generating 3D models on the fly, that just sparks creativity. This is where the virtual can actually surpass the physical. But here's where it gets really, really powerful. This isn't just a one-way street where science gives knowledge to the public. It's a two-way exchange. It's a truly symbiotic relationship. This idea is just incredible. Every community transforms into an open-air innovation lab. When people adapt these tools and recipes, they aren't just solving their problems. They're inventing and creating thousands of micro-innovations. And for researchers, that's a goldmine. We get to move beyond sterile lab data. All of a sudden, scientists have access to pure, authentic data that comes directly from real-world practice. So research isn't just driven by a scientist's assumptions anymore, but by what's actually happening on the ground. This creates this amazing self-fueling engine for progress. Communities innovate, researchers gather that authentic data. Science improves because of those real-world insights, and in turn, it provides even better tools back to the communities. It's a loop that just keeps accelerating. So all of this, it isn't science fiction. It's a movement that's already happening, it's growing, and it's building a new future. And this last part is really an invitation for you. What we're all witnessing is a fundamental update. You could call it Knowledge Mobilization 2.0, and it's an open invitation to join this whole new way of working. In this new ecosystem, the old roles just disappear. You're not one or the other anymore. You get to be both a student and a teacher, a user and a creator, a consumer and a contributor. This movement is already here. It's happening. So the question we have to ask ourselves isn't if it's happening, but what role do we want to play in it? What will our contribution be? The power to act, to create, and to share is here. It's in our hands. So I guess the only question left is, what's the first recipe you want to make your own?
Thank you for your listening.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to all our speakers. I know we've not got a lot of time for Q&A, but I do want to invite maybe a couple of questions, and I'll hand it back to Dave and Justin for any sort of final closing remarks. So, Maureen, I don't know if there's anything in the chat you want to flag.
So I was monitoring the chat while all the presentations are going, and there were a lot of links being put in, but I didn't see any questions. And we did promise Justin and Dave that we would give them some time to hear the reflections. But if there's one quick question, we can take it first, and then we'll go right to Justin and Dave. So I'm looking. I don't see. So now I've lost the chat because I got kicked off. But I was looking, and there was nothing in it. So if there's someone who has a question, please make yourself known. Otherwise, I will hand it over to Justin and Dave, and just be sure to thank all of our wonderful speakers today. And hopefully we've provided you with some food for thought. So, here we go. Norman Buckley has a question. Any examples of functioning learning health systems? There's a good question. Who wants to take that?
I learned.
Yeah.
I learned everything starts with invitation from a researcher. After 10 years of exclusion and isolation, a researcher, thanks to them, invite me to become a partner in the project. And since then, it's a new mission, a new vocation. And actually, I'm involved in several projects in initiative, also in Quebec, even if English population communities open me the doors, I try to connect. And here in Quebec, we have le système de santé apprenant, learning system unit. So, and it's work. Just continue. No perfection, but let's continue to claim excellence and work together in collaboration. Don't know if.
Okay, merci. Yeah, I think we're all working towards it. Okay, I'm going to hand it over quickly to Justin and Dave for any reflections that you have based on what you heard today. So
excellent. Thank you, Maureen. I will. I'll take over from Justin on this one. So I just wanted to thank the Patient Engagement Committee for the tremendous effort and work that was put into today's webinar, and especially the speakers of today's presentation. It was really fantastic. I truly loved Ada's tree analogy that really sums up the work that we do in patient engagement and knowledge mobilization, and the fact that the roots that we nourish sometimes take years to really see the fruits of those efforts, and that building those relationships is really core to making this work happen and to being able to empower patients to really engage with us in the patient in the knowledge mobilization work that we do. So I really appreciate that analogy. And then going to Jan's presentation about how we can involve patients in the full spectrum of it's not Jan's presentation, but we had the presentation on how patients can be involved in integrated knowledge mobilization efforts and the value of including patients at all stages. I think was really important. I think a lot of times, sometimes we get in our heads that we'll bring patients in at the end and have them tell us how to mobilize the knowledge, but really thinking about involving patient partners in all steps of our research throughout and thinking about how we're going to mobilize that knowledge throughout is really key. And so really appreciated that presentation. But of course, Amanda brought in, when we do involve patients for end-of-grant knowledge mobilization efforts and co-presenting and disseminating research with patients as authors and co-presenters, I think all of the really tangible, practical things we need to think about was really appreciated as well. Those are all things that I had to learn the hard way and didn't think about ahead of time, and was taking patient partners on cross-country road trips to present and all of these things. Everything you mentioned, Amanda, you know, from the accessibility concerns to not knowing what a conference is, all of those were really practical and will be super helpful, I think, I'm going to bring my team the recording of this webinar and make sure they all listen to it before we go to conferences with our patient partners, because I think that was super helpful. And then to think about how patients, I think the comment was made that sometimes patients bring things to the table that the academic team don't have. And I think Jan's example of bringing in language model and using AI to generate a tool that so clearly and succinctly defines and describes things in a much better way than we as researchers often do. I think it was I love how you said, Jan, leading by example, really showing us an actual example, rather than just saying you could use AI and technology to do this. You actually showed it to us. And I think that was really powerful and will be a huge resource to all of us going forward as we think about knowledge mobilization and including patients in our efforts. So once again, I think the presentations today were just absolutely fantastic. And I thank Stuart and Maureen for your efforts organizing this and working with your committee, and to all the members of your committee, thank you for being here and for sharing with the knowledge mobilization community within ACT. And we wish you all a great day and hope you all join us for the next webinar, which is coming up next month. So thank you all for all your time and being here today.